Welcome to Bite at a Time Books Behind the Story, where we answer the questions you have about your favorite classic authors. What inspired your favorite author to write their novels? What was going on in the world at the time? Follow along with us as we tell you what was happening in the world while your favorite authors wrote your favorite classics. My name is Bree Carlile, and I love to read, and wanted to share my passion with listeners like you. If you enjoy our show, be sure to follow the show on your favorite podcast platform so you get all the new episodes. You can find us on all the social medias at Bite at a Time Books or on our website, biteatatimebooksbehindthestory.com, where you can also sign up for our newsletter for more information on who we're talking about and what's coming next for the podcasts. We're part of the Bite at a Time Books Productions Network. If you'd also like to hear a book by the author we are currently featuring, check out the Bite at a Time Books podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Today we'll be talking about the works of Jack London. Short stories. Western writer and historian Dale L. Walker writes, London's true métier was the short story. London's true genius lay in the short form, 7,500 words and under, where the flood of images in his teeming brain and the innate power of his narrative gift were at once constrained and freed. His stories that run longer than the magic 7,500, generally, but certainly not always, could have benefited from self-editing. London's strength of utterance is at its height in his stories, and they are painstakingly well-constructed. To Build a Fire is the best known of all his stories. Set in the harsh Klondike, it recounts the haphazard trek of a new arrival who's ignored an old-timer's warning about the risks of traveling alone. Falling through the ice into a creek in 75 below weather, the unnamed man is keenly aware that survival depends on his untested skills at quickly building a fire to dry his clothes and warm his extremities. After publishing a tame version of this story, with a sunny outcome, in The Youth's Companion in 1902, London offered a second, more severe take on the man's predicament in the Century magazine in 1908. Reading both provides an illustration of London's growth and maturation as a writer. As Labor, 1994, observes, to compare the two versions is itself an instructive lesson in what distinguished a great work of literary art from a good children's story. Other stories from the Klondike period include All Gold Canyon, about a battle between a gold prospector and a claim jumper. The Law of Life, about an aging American Indian man abandoned by his tribe and left to die. Love of Life, about a trek by a prospector across the Canadian tundra. To The Man on Trail, which tells the story of a prospector fleeing the mounted police in a sled race, and raises the question of the contrast between written law and morality. And An Odyssey of the North, which raises questions of conditional morality and paints a sympathetic portrait of a man of mixed white and Aleut ancestry. London was a boxing fan and an avid amateur boxer. A Piece of Steak is a tale about a match between older and younger boxers. It contrasts the differing experiences of youth and age, but also raises the social question of the treatment of aging workers. The Mexican combines boxing with a social theme, as a young Mexican endures an unfair fight and ethnic prejudice to earn money with which to aid the revolution. Several of London's stories would today be classified as science fiction. The Unparalleled Invasion describes germ warfare against China. Goliath is about an irresistible energy weapon. The Shadow in the Flesh is a tale about two brothers who take different routes to achieve invisibility. A Relic of the Pliocene is a tall tale about an encounter of a modern-day man with a mammoth. The Red One is a late story from a period when London was intrigued by the theories of the psychiatrist and writers Jung. It tells of an island tribe held in thrall by an extraterrestrial object. Some 19 original collections of short stories were published during London's brief life, or shortly after his death. There have been several posthumous anthologies drawn from this pool of stories. Many of these stories were located in the Klondike in the Pacific. A collection of Jack London's San Francisco stories was published in October 2010 by Sydney Samstadt Press. Novels. London's most famous novels are The Call of the Wild, White Fang, The Sea Wolf, The Iron Heel, and Martin Eden. In a letter dated December 27, 1901, London's Macmillan publisher, George Platt Sr., said he believed Jack's fiction represented the very best kind of work done in America. Critic Maxwell Geismar called The Call of the Wild a beautiful prose poem. Editor Franklin Walker said that it belongs on a shelf with Walden and Huckleberry Finn, and novelist E.L. Dockerow called it a mordant parable, his masterpiece. The historian Del L. Walker commented, "Jack London was an uncomfortable novelist. That formed too long for his natural impatience and the quickness of his mind. His novels, even the best of them, are hugely flawed. Some critics have said that his novels are episodic and resemble linked short stories." Dale L. Walker writes, "The Star Rover, that magnificent experiment, is actually a series of short stories connected by a unifying device. Smoke Blue is a series of short stories bound together in a novel-like form by their reappearing protagonist, Kit Blue. And John Barleycorn is a synoptic series of short episodes." Ambrose Bierce said of the Sea-Wolf that the great thing, and it is among the greatest of things, is that tremendous creation, Wolf Larsen. The hewing out and setting up of such a figure is enough for a man to do in one lifetime. However, he noted, the love element, with its absurd suppressions and impossible proprieties, is awful. The Iron Heel is an example of a dystopian novel that anticipates and influenced George Orwell's 1984. London's socialist politics are explicitly on display here. The Iron Heel meets the contemporary definition of soft science fiction. The Star Rover, 1915, is also science fiction. Credo is likely by London, despite doubts. London's literary executor, Irving Shepherd, quoted a Jack London credo in an introduction to a 1956 collection of London stories. "I would rather be ashes than dust. I would rather that my spark should burn out in a brilliant blaze than it should be stifled by dry rot. I would rather be a superb meteor, every atom of me in magnificent glow, than a sleepy and permanent planet. The function of man is to live, not to exist. I shall not waste my days in trying to prolong them. I shall use my time." The biographer Stotts notes that the passage has many marks of London style, but the only line that could be safely attributed to London was the first. The words Shepherd quoted were from a story in the San Francisco Bulletin, December 2nd, 1916, by journalist Ernest J. Hopkins, who visited the ranch just weeks before London's death. Stahls notes, "Even more so than today, journalists' quotes were unreliable, or even sheer inventions, and says no direct source in London's writings has been found. However, at least one line, according to Stahls, is authentic, being referenced by London and written in his own hand in the autograph book of Australian suffragette Vida Goldstein. Dear Miss Goldstein, 7 years ago I wrote you that I'd rather be ashes than dust. I still subscribe to that sentiment. Sincerely yours, Jack London, January 13th, 1909. In his short story, By the Turtles of Tasman, a character, defending her ne'er-do-well grasshopperish father to her ant-like uncle, says, "My father has been a king. He has lived. Have you lived merely to live? Are you afraid to die? I'd rather sing one wild song and burst my heart with it than live 1,000 years watching my digestion and being afraid of the wet. When you are dust, my father will be ashes." The last 3 sentences of the Credo have been deemed to be an authentic quotation of Jack London by the Oxford Dictionary of American Quotations. Likewise, National Public Radio has ascribed the quotation to Jack London and explained that it was published via a journalist. NPR did not question the accuracy of that reporter who first published the Credo in 1916. Part of the Credo was used to describe the philosophy of the fictional character James Bond in the Ian Fleming novel You Only Live Twice, 1964, and again in the movie No Time to Die, 2021. According to a 2021 article about that Bond movie in The Independent, the quote was originally by the American writer Jack London. Diatribe about scabs has unknown author. A short diatribe on the scab is often quoted within the U.S. labor movement and frequently attributed to London. It opens, "After God had finished the rattlesnake, the toad, and the vampire, he had some awful substance left with which he made a scab." A scab is a 2-legged animal with a corkscrew soul, a water brain, a combination backbone of jelly and glue. Where others have hearts, he carries a tumor of rotten principles. When a scab comes down the street, men turn their backs, and the angels weep in heaven, and the devil shuts the gates of hell to keep him out. In 1913 and 1914, a number of newspapers printed the first 3 sentences with varying terms used instead of scab, such as knocker, stool pigeon, or scandalmonger. Those newspapers did not attribute those sentences to London. This passage, as given above, was the subject of a 1974 Supreme Court case, Letter Carriers v. Austin, in which Justice Thurgood Marshall referred to it as a well-known piece of trade union literature, generally attributed to author Jack London. A union newsletter had published a list of scabs, which was granted to be factual and therefore not libelous, but then went on to quote the passage as the definition of a scab. The case turned on the question of whether the definition was defamatory. The court ruled that Jack London's definition of a scab is merely rhetorical hyperbole, a lusty and imaginative expression of the contempt felt by union members towards those who refused to join, and as such was not libelous and was protected under the First Amendment. Despite being frequently attributed to London, the passage does not appear at all in the extensive collection of his writings at Sonoma State University's website. However, in his book, War of the Classes, he published a 1903 speech titled The Scab, which gave a much more balanced view of the topic. The laborer who gives more time or strength or skill for the same wage than another, or equal time or strength or skill for a less wage, is a scab. The generousness on his part is hurtful to his fellow laborers, for it compels them to an equal generousness which is not to their liking, and which gives them less of food and shelter. But a word may be said for the scab. Just as his act makes his rivals compulsorily generous, so do they, by fortune of birth and training, make compulsory his act of generousness. Nobody desires to scab, to give most for least. The ambition of every individual is quite the opposite, to give least for most, and as a result, living in a tooth-and-nail society, battle royale is waged by the ambitious individuals. But in its most salient aspect, that of the struggle over the division of the joint product, it is no longer a battle between individuals, but between groups of individuals. Capital and labor apply themselves to raw material, make something useful out of it, add to its value, and then proceed to quarrel over the division of the added value. Neither cares to give most for least. Each is intent on giving less than the other and on receiving more. Thank you for joining Bite at a Time Books Behind the Story today, while we answered some of the questions you have about one of your favorite classic authors. Again, my name is Bree Carlile, and I hope you join us next time when we answer more questions about one of your favorite classic authors. If you enjoyed our show, be sure to follow us so you get all the new episodes. We would also love for you to drop us a rating on your favorite podcast platform. You can catch us on all the social medias at Bite at a Time Books, or check out our website, biteatatimebooksbehindthestory.com, where you can sign up for our newsletter. Our show is part of the Bite at a Time Books Productions Network. If you would also like to hear a story by the author we are currently featuring, check out the Bite at a Time Books podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, or on biteatatimebooks.com.